Welcome to Your Pennsylvania Ancestors. This is Denise Allen with PAAncestors.com, and I hope this episode of the podcast, it comes to you like meeting two people out for coffee or drinks and talking about genealogy. After months and various forms of lockdown, I know I've missed the fun of meeting and talking with new people, and maybe you have too. I had the pleasure of talking with Donna Cox Baker, who has a doctorate in history and is an avid genealogist in Alabama. Donna shares about genohistory, what it is, how she came up with the idea, and how you can participate in it. And now, here's my conversation with Donna Cox Baker. Donna Cox Baker, I want to welcome you to the podcast. I am just so excited to have you on. One, because we're still in the middle of quarantine and the pandemic. So it's always exciting to meet new people in a safe way. But I just love your whole background and what you're about. And could you introduce yourself to the listeners and what your project is?
Oh, sure. Thank you so much, Denise, for letting me come and talk to this group. And I mentioned to you earlier, this is my first time to talk about genohistory, which I'm going to talk about mostly today. And so I appreciate you guys giving me a chance to, I've written about it, but to actually verbalize what I've written about. But my name is Donna Baker. I am from Birmingham, Alabama originally, and now live in Tuscaloosa, where I work for the University of Alabama by day. By night, I get to be genealogist, genohistorian, historian, and other things. So I created my first blog about genealogy, 2016. And it was one called The Golden Egg Genealogist, and it's still out there, gagbound.com. But it was my very first try at blogging, and I had gone all over the place. I wanted a blog that let me talk about anything, and I found that just wears you completely out, trying to get good coverage. So I created, in the meantime, a publishing company called Golden Channel Publishing to publish my own work and some tools that I use and so forth. And that's been great. But I'll talk in a minute about why genohistory became the thing I decided to put my focus on starting in May of this year. But to go a little further back, I mean, I've been doing genealogy since mid-80s, so 35 years or so. I had moved to Fort Wayne, Indiana, and I don't think I'd ever heard of genealogy, but you can't move to Fort Wayne, Indiana without being introduced to that wonderful thing, and I got hooked while I was living there. And I'd done genealogy on and off in that 35 years, but it introduced me to history, and I didn't think people could have a career in genealogy. That never even really crossed my mind that you could do that. So I became a historian and ended up going to school for history, which I also love. But the minute I finished my dissertation in 2014, it was actually on New Year's Eve, 2013, as the fireworks were going off. I finished it was like, one of those moments. When I finished my dissertation in history after 8 years, I pulled back out the genealogy box that I hadn't seen in a decade. And I haven't let go of that since. So for the last 6 years, genealogy came back. It came back to its place in my life. And so I love being able to do this work and also to have the background in history. And that's going to sort of lead to where we're going to go today, I guess.
So in May, you started blogging about genohistory. And I am saying it correct, right? Genohistory or genohistory? How do you want it said?
I think it can be any way that someone's comfortable with. I think of it in the same vein as genocide, not a good word, but so I tend to say genohistory, but, genohistory would also work.
You know why I say genohistory? Because Philadelphia has Geno Steaks, which is one of the original cheesesteak places.
Oh, okay.
Geno's the cheesesteak. Yeah, you can tell I'm like a Philly girl. I grew up outside of Philly. But anyway, But how did you come up with this idea? It just feels like one of these genius quarantine things that happen,
I think I was already quarantined when I started thinking about this, but I had about a year ago, I had realized that the Golden Egg Genealogist blog was just taking too much time because I didn't have a focus. I didn't have a niche, and I needed to find something I could really sink my teeth into. And I started thinking about, my background and so forth. But I realized how I keep wanting to bounce back and forth. I'm the president of the Alabama Genealogical Society. I'm active in the Alabama Historical Society. It's two different sets of people. And I keep wondering, who am I? Who am I? And I think genealogists often will measure their success by how far back they're able to go and document. And I noticed that I'm not going farther back. I keep stopping in one place and wanting to look around and get to know the lay of the land. And so I have been stuck in Centerville, Alabama, 1850s for a couple of years now, and I don't want to leave. I still am learning new things every day about that place, and someday I'll get bored with it and I want to move on. But right now, I just want to know that town, and I want to know what my ancestors saw and experienced. And so a richer picture, not just a quick sketch before I move to the next generation. So genohistory is that it's blending the time and place with the people. And it's not, I didn't invent anything. I mean, I've certainly knew that this was where I have lived for a long time. It just didn't have a name. And I felt like I was diverting off of the path of genealogy, or diverting off of the path of history, and falling behind while others were moving forward. But then I finally realized this is where I want to be. I like this intersection of history and genealogy. And why can't I just stay here and do this? And I thought, let me give it a name. And so yeah, genohistory, I've got a definition that I hope will be in the dictionary someday if we all decide to use this word. And what I picture the dictionary saying is the cross-disciplinary study of an interconnected group of people, often a family, within the context of its own time and place. So that sort of puts it in a nut. And when I launched the website in May 10th, I wasn't sure what the response would be. I thought, I feel at home in this middle ground. Are there others? And I believed there were, but they have shown up, and it's wonderful because they're actually commenting. When I blogged before, I might occasionally get a comment, but they're actually commenting and saying, "Yeah, I'm a genohistorian." And hey, I said it genohistorian that time. Did you hear me? So it can be anything we want to call it. There are a lot of people who have been doing this a lot longer than I have, and they, what I call dawdle in one place, getting to know it and taking it from a sketch to a painting, to really get a better picture of where our ancestors lived, how they lived, what they experienced.
I love the idea of taking it from a sketch to a painting.
Yeah,
it really is. It's because you did a post about looking at the neighbors
yes,
of one of your ancestors. Was it 16 neighbors?
yes.
Yeah,
16,
and I
16
thought,
households.
and you wrote about them and
Yeah.
the relationships between the families, and it was so warm and welcoming. It made me feel like I was, walking down the street and like meeting everyone. It wasn't done to like necessarily get anything. Like I'm trying to get somebody's, to know who the parent is or whatever. Because I've seen that done for that circumstance. But it was nice just to be there with them as people. It was wonderful.
Well, thank you, because that's exactly how I felt about it. Because I didn't go into it thinking I want to know how it felt to walk up the street here. I went into it actually because I wanted to know the slaveholding. Who were the slaveholders on the street? Because it's part of another project, and we can talk about that if you want to soon. But the Beyond Kin project. But that's what I had started with. I didn't expect to find that every household was intermarried with every other household, and that they all had borders in their houses, and that they had these similar occupations, that you had merchants and clerks and peddlers and doctors and lawyers. And I was on a street of town. And you could just feel it as you started to look at the occupations of the people in there. So yeah, it became a world to me. It became a little world that I hadn't expected to find.
Yeah. Okay. So you did start with a goal, but if you could explain to the audience the Beyond Kin project, because you mentioned it and it's wonderful. I'm in love with this project.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And the Beyond Kin project is something you can find online at beyondkin.org. It started with teaching a class, an Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at the University of Alabama, a genealogy class. I was co-teaching with a colleague, and she, I was in the middle of blogging at that time and always looking for topics, but she put up on the board a picture of a bill of sale of her ancestor buying an enslaved woman. And it was just this lightning bolt to me at that moment that it was the first time I got it, that white people had the records. That if you are trying to find your ancestors and you're African American, that the white families had the records. And they're the ones that took the names off of your ancestors. So the people that really need to be involved in documenting the enslaved people are the descendants of the slaveholders. And I got so excited about that idea because, you know, I'd never thought about there being something I could do. And, but then when I started trying to figure out how do you document people when the name has been stripped away, in the census records, you know, there's no name at all, in the slave schedules. And then in other records, there's often just a first name, or a description. My earlier career was in technical writing and computers. My brain, and my father was an engineer. I just have this engineering brain, and I was laying awake all night trying to figure out how to use our software to document a whole plantation. And so that's what the Beyond Kin project is a method for using Ancestry or Legacy or Family Tree Maker or something like that, to create all the networks and to begin to document people that you only know their first name or you only know their age, and begin to slowly but surely figure out that the black male age 35 is actually Riley, who became Riley Avery, and you begin to piece together their story. So that's actually where this genohistory, I think, began to birth itself in me, is when this happened in 2016. I began to realize as I documented the enslaved population of my ancestor, Jacob Mayberry, that I knew him better than I ever had before. When I realized that he had invested his entire fortune in land and enslaved people, that you start to get, okay, this is why he would send his son to war. He's trying to preserve his entire 401k.
Right.
He's terrified of losing his wealth, and you start to understand things in a new way with a new depth, and you start to get that the life wasn't 9 white people in a house; it was 9 white people and 42 Black people all sharing this environment together, which gives you a whole different picture. So that was sort of my first genohistorical experience of looking out from my family to the bigger picture around them. And then I moved beyond their fences and it became genohistory, you know, more of the town.
It is just so fantastic because you just gave people a method and tools to do something with history, with their past,
Yeah.
you know, rather than I've seen people who discovered that they had ancestors who were slaveholders and they just announced they're going to wipe out that entire branch of their tree. They're just erasing those people,
Right.
you know, whether it's especially in Ancestry or Family Search, because those trees are so public. And
Right.
I always have this moment of, you know, you're wiping out so much. Like I get people are not proud of that
Yeah.
past. I totally, I mean, none of us are. But you just explained when you wipe out the slaveholders, you're wiping out the enslaved people also.
You are. And there's an arrogance to saying they're bad, they need to be wiped out of history. if you are not conscious of the fact that had you been born in the same house, the same family, the same church, the same town, the same time, it would have been you. So I like for us to take the arrogance out of the picture, take the judgment out, but just recognize we got a story to tell of our past, good, bad, and ugly. Let's do it, and don't wait for somebody else to tell your story. Do it yourself.
Wise words, wise words. Yeah, you and I were chatting before the podcast too, and I think anyone who does any family history, you're always just one record away from finding something that just shocks you, right? And there is then I think an emotional process we go through as family historians where we really grapple with the past, and I think you gave people a way to do it, to just withhold judgment. We have the opportunity of being born in this time and place,
Right.
of knowing a lot more of the world and how it operates and what the effects are on people. But
right, we definitely want to judge the institution, because an institution like that can resurrect itself. So we want to judge that and make sure that we are so conscious of what made it happen before that we don't let it happen again. But if we wipe it out of our story, there's so much we don't learn about ourselves and how we got here. So it's been an incredible journey.
What is your hope with Genohistory? Like, when do you have any hopes when you're lying there at night and you think, oh, it's, this time next year or 5 years from now? What?
I want us to begin to feel like a community, and I think we already are beginning to do that. Those of us who have felt like we were on the periphery of history and genealogy because we didn't quite want to run up the family tree as fast as others, or we didn't want to do the social history that historians are doing, that we find our place and that we build methods together, and that we encourage each other. One of the things we need to learn how to do is how to write a genohistory. I'm sure there's some that have been done, but most people will write a family history, which is really a genealogy with anecdotes, or they write a local history, which is usually from the perspective of the municipality or the county or something. But to figure out how to write history from the inside out, from a group of people, maybe 16 households on Market Street in Centerville, but how to write history from the perspective through the eyes of the people who experienced it, so that we start to get a richer picture of who our ancestors were, but also of the towns, of the counties, of every place, of looking at them through new eyes. The day that I see genohistory in the dictionary, that will be an exciting day. Wouldn't be surprised if we begin to have genohistory societies, or I don't like the word society, but genohistory associations or whatever, and begin to gather to talk about what we do, like we do in genealogy and history. I don't see competing. I think that anybody who wants to do genohistory is going to have to know genealogy, and going to have to know history, and probably is going to be digging into anthropology, archaeology, law, music, art, architecture, all of these things. So I think it can be a real cerebral group who comes together to try to create something new that lies in between these two things that many of us love.
Oh, I would love that. You're in Alabama, I'm in Pennsylvania, and I think each state, each area had its own sort of things that people gathered around. So in Pennsylvania, it was the early iron furnaces, for instance. Right. That was an early institution that we had, and they had distinct cultures. All those families clearly knew each other. There was an iron master. Everyone lived together. The iron master kept logs of everything going on with everyone that worked. And I think about that, and so much of that history is just sort of like, they'll see iron furnace or smelter or something in the census, and like, oh, they worked in a steel factory, because that's our mindset, is this factory with like big machines and whatever. It's like, no, you're looking at the 1850 census. That wasn't invented yet.
Exactly.
They were pouring into casts, and making plates of iron and then assembling them into stoves or whatever that furnace did. So I, as a genealogist, when I do research for people, have to educate them. Like, here's links, here's books where you can read more about what your family did in those roles, and who they were, because for me to write it all up is like immense, like it's in my brain. Like, and maybe you find this, like, you have things in your brain, but to get it from your brain to paper, it's like, I don't want to feel like I'm cheating people, but I'm, trying to just give them the resources so they can do the fill their brain from the original sources, if that makes any sense.
Well, even to be conscious that they're there. And that's one of the things we can do for each other, is to create among ourselves a consciousness of something we never thought to look for before. Like, how did you smelt in, this particular time? How did you smelt iron? Or, what would happen if you had a drought in Alabama? What would happen to your crop, and how would you live? Just questions like that we usually don't get to, but if we want to understand them, a flood, an earthquake, how would it have affected people in a particular time? Is you're thinking with a new mind when you ask those questions.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's because sometimes it can look kind of, when you're just looking at records, it can look sort of mishmash. Like sometimes when people move or they're relocating, or, and you're trying to, like, well, why did they move? And you really got to dig into maybe going through newspapers or historical journals or something to figure out what was going on.
Right. My great-great-grandfather, why did he move back? After reading newspapers, he was the sheriff in a town and he didn't get elected. And so he left town. So he moved. So you gotta dig until you have answers, and then you get a more of a sense of personalities and egos and how it worked. And so
the one thing I guess we do have in common with our ancestors is personalities and egos.
Exactly. Ego is a universal thing.
It sure is.
Our ancestors had it.
Yeah. So they're not all flat, equal people. There were obviously some people that were very extroverted, and some people were more quiet, and some people were the class clown, and some,
Exactly.
Yeah, I try to think about that. My one ancestor in particular, there was this, those biographies that were written in the late 19th century about, like, the famous people or whatever, in the town, like, local business people or something, and
exactly.
there'll be a few paragraphs about them. So his reads that he was born in Wrangletown, and I was like, there's no Wrangletown in this county, right? And it took me reading through historical journals for that county to find out that Wrangletown was the nickname for this intersection of 5 roads where there were 5 taverns.
Yeah.
And so it was infamous for bar fights and gambling and all this stuff in, like, the mid 1800s. In this county, it was like the bad part of town. Like, if anything was going to happen, it was going to happen in this Wrangletown. I was like, what is a sense of humor? Like, he's either indicating like he was born on the wrong side of the tracks, as the saying that we say, or he was born in this was he the son of a prostitute, or I still haven't found his parents, but that Wrangletown thing is a clue, right?
Yeah.
And I just couldn't dismiss it as like, oh, somebody made an error when they typed this up. Like, there's no place called Wrangletown, and just ignore the fact. I kept kind of digging at it, and I was like, and I was like, it's just, to me, this branch of my family has a wicked sense of humor, and I think he was just being funny about it. Like, I was born in in a bar, I'm just a son of a tavern owner or something. Like, I was like, okay.
And everybody around him would have known exactly what he meant.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. And like his official death certificate, because he died in 1929. So there's one of those, said he was the actual boring place that exists, it didn't say Wrangletown, but
Something similar happened recently, because in Centerville, in a book about the county, Bibb County, there was a mention of the first courthouse being out on the road to Montgomery, and I kept thinking, okay, I want to know where the first courthouse was, but no book ever told me. Eventually, I had somebody tell me it was in Antioch, Alabama, and so I'm the editor of a history magazine, so we have a Facebook page, and we put out a post about this courthouse, and fortunately locals are your great source, because they often have not written down what grandmama told them, but they remember it. And so they came on and they began to tell us stories, and they could tell me exactly where that courthouse was. But I had found the only thing I saw on the road was something called Soap Hill. And one of them said, oh, that it was called Soap Hill back then, where the courthouse was, because they had to move it because all the wagons going up to the courthouse kept sliding back down again on the mud. And so they called it Soap Hill because it was slippery. And of course, the Soap Hill disappeared from all the new maps. That was never there anymore. There was never any mention of the courthouse being at Soap Hill. But we were able to piece it together because of this little memory that someone had of it being a slippery slope to the courthouse.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I love that story.
I love when people can work together and solve the problems. And a lot of the local people they just have invaluable information. They just don't even know anybody wants to hear it.
Exactly. I think people discount what they do know, because to them it's just what they know, and it's what they grew up with, and they don't think it really matters to anybody. And I think we as genealogists need to ask too, right?
Exactly.
Like not just type into search boxes on the internet, but actually contact local historical and genealogical societies and Facebook groups and whatever, and just ask questions and talk and share. And that could be your fourth cousin or fifth cousin.
Exactly. Probably is.
You can share with them what happened on your branch of the family tree. They can share with you what it's like, where your ancestors were from, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, you never know when a really valuable piece of information is going to pop in there. I mean, this man gave me a reason why the courthouse got moved. I had never seen anybody say why the courthouse got moved, that was a slippery wagon. But he gave us a little piece. Now, we would want to back it up with something from legislative records or something, and I'll do that someday. But he gave me something to look for,
Donna, do you have anything else you'd like to share about Genohistory or the Beyond Kim project or your other work?
Well, I would love for people to join us at genohistorian.com. That's genohistorian.com. Sunday will be the next post. I do it every 2 weeks. This Sunday, I'm going to be moving over to the history side. I'm going to be talking about how to take history with a grain of salt when you need to, when and why you might need to take history with a grain of salt. That'll be a sort of a departure and something new. Most everything's been genealogical up until now, but you can go back and see the 4 blogs that have been posted since May. And if you want to be notified that a new post is there is a way to just sign up on at the bottom of the blog post, or a little pop-up window that comes up. And so just sign up and I will let you know when the next one is there. And also will give you a link to a little mini course on how to use my tool of choice for capturing research, a tool called Zotero. So it gives you 25 minutes, how to get up and running on Zotero in 25 minutes. So you can get that little bonus if you sign up to be on the newsletter. So.
Oh, that's perfect. And yeah. I'll put all those links in the show notes so people can find you.
Great.
You're sort of like Leonardo da Vinci. You got like the technical part, kind of the techie, with the Zotero, using that tool. You've got the history, you've got the genealogy,
I've always envied those guys back then that got to be a hyphenate everything. I'm a mathematician, scientist,
right,
writer, preacher. They got to be everything at one time. I keep trying it, but it gives me migraines. I have to sort of stick to one thing at a time, but it doesn't really work. I always
I have a feeling it doesn't work with you.
No, it doesn't.
I think you get fascinated with something, you dive in, and it's wonderful because you share so freely, we all get to benefit. And really find a community of similar-minded people, who want, like you said, to just really stay a while and get to know our ancestors in a certain time and place. And thank you for.
We'd love to see the Pennsylvania gang coming around on Sundays to the post and commenting and telling us what you're doing.
Yeah, well, the podcast has listeners from all over the country. A lot of people desperate to find their Pennsylvania ancestors.
Exactly.
Because we in Pennsylvania like to tuck all those records in every available archive and courthouse and historical society around the state. So people, no matter where their ancestors are in time and place, should join you, definitely.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yes, I think from all over, because we have a rich and varied history in this country, and we all should, I shouldn't say should, we all have the opportunity to share it. Yeah.
Well, I am having so much fun with it. I think together it's only going to get more and more exciting and fun.
Good. I can't wait. I can't wait we should check in a year and see how it's changed and evolved and maybe coalesced, and because concepts do move, and
they do.
Yeah.
And people may have ideas for where to take this that I hadn't even conceived of. So I'm excited about it. Let's get together again. So.
All right, great. Well, Donna, thank you so much for being on the podcast, and thank you for keeping me company in quarantine for a little bit. And everybody else too who's listening.
You too. Thanks, Denise.
All right, thank you. As you can tell, I'm really excited about the idea of pulling together local history and my ancestors' lives into a cohesive genohistory. I signed up for Donna's emails at genohistorian.com, and I hope you sign up there too. I put the link in the show notes just so you can find it easier. And here's my invitation for any genealogist taking a second look at his or her family tree. Stay a while and hang out with your ancestors. Learn the details of their lives, their communities, their neighbors, their local events, and the traditions in their lives. Maybe that brick wall is your ancestors' way of creating a space for you to dig in a little bit deeper into their history and their lives. I'll be sharing some more resources I'm developing over at my website at PA Ancestors to help people research their family in Pennsylvania and get to better know their ancestors. If you haven't been on the website, there's links there for newspapers, local histories, history journals, a whole variety of resources that'll probably help you become a genohistorian. And if you want to be the first to know about any resources that I post on my website, I have a weekly newsletter of articles, and you can sign up for that on my website, paancestors.com. If you have any feedback on the podcast or comments, I would love to hear them. You can go to paancestors.com, and there's Contact Me, where you can fill out a form and send that comment directly to me. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to you tuning in to next week's episode.